Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of 4Expedition Unplugged. I'm Scott Leuthold. Well, today's another day for sharing some commentary with all of you, and it's a very reflective week for me. It's my birthday week. I turn 53, as I mentioned last week, on Wednesday, October 12th. And it's always a time for me to reflect on where I'm at, where I'm going, what I'm doing, and I do have to say that I'm very pleased with my life, and I'm very pleased with the direction I'm going. I do waver back and forth on a few things here and there, as some of you may know. I'll comment on things in the community board on my channel here and there because I like to get your feedback. I like to get some interaction from all of you, and I'm not afraid to share my thoughts, things that I've got going on in my head, talking about things like is it worth it to keep making videos, for instance? I invest probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 48 to 50 hours a week in creating videos. And I like to see a significant result of my efforts, and I've not been seeing that. So I've been wavering back and forth between what kinds of content I want to create, whether I want to keep creating content and all that. But it's all just contemplations. But that really got me thinking about what I wanted to talk about this week. About a month and a half ago, I wrote an article that got picked up by the Santa Fe New Mexican, which is the state newspaper for New Mexico. And they ran an essay that I wrote in their Sunday edition. And it had to do with the forest fires. And ultimately, the foundational concept for the essay was about legacy. And in particular, that article talked about what it really meant for native New Mexicans to lose their property due to the forest fires. And really, it came down to legacy, because a lot of those people those properties that burned had been in families for over 300 years. It's a really, really big deal. And what really burned and what was really affected by the fire was legacy. So, as some of you know, I wrote a book, published it back in 2011, called Rediscovering Your Divine Music. And divine music refers to the harmony and the vibration that you sense and you align with when you're in nature. Nowadays, a lot of people refer to the 432 hertz frequency. Well, divine music, the concept for divine music, is something that I arrived at after reading some of my favorite authors: Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, John Muir, Aldo Leopold. And at least some of those writers mentioned the divine music in their writings. And so that's where that all came from. Those concepts came from in my head. But I was thinking about legacy, and it's a really interesting thing. When I think about Thoreau and Emerson and Muir and Leopold and the writings that they have gifted to the world that have changed many people's lives and shaped all sorts of philosophies on nature and conservation and all that, I think it's really fascinating to think about when they wrote those books. The only medium they had to use was writing and publishing. And I wonder, thinking of this idea of legacy, when they were alive, what kind of popularity they had. Or was it that later on in life, after they passed on, their legacy lived on and grew and grew and grew over time, until generations even today are influenced by their writings? That to me is legacy. When I think about my medium being YouTube, it's really incredible. Technology is just incredible to think about how you could reach 1 million people in a single day. That is incredible influence compared to when Thoreau, let's say, wrote Walden. And this is a guy who basically said, I'm going to follow my passion. I want to live. He went to the woods, as he says, to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to learn what it had to teach, and not, when he came to die, learn that he had not lived. And that's a very famous quote of his. I really treasure that perspective, which is one of the reasons I'm here in this cabin in the mountains. But my question is, while Thoreau was doing what he was doing, he was living in the woods on Walden Pond, and writing his thoughts. My question is, did he influence a significant number of people while he was alive, or was it after he passed on? Or was it much, much later in his later years of life that he actually had such influence? And interestingly enough, while he was alive, how many people did he actually touch with his writings? A couple 100,000 maybe? It wasn't in the millions, and it certainly didn't happen overnight. But an interesting point to make about this social media thing, we have such power to reach 1 million people in a single day, which is a level of power that these authors in the past did not have. At the same time, there are 30 million other people trying to do the exact same thing as you. So there's a significant amount of competition in having your message received by a broader audience that these authors from the past did not have to deal with the way we do. So it's interesting. We have an incredible power to reach a lot of people with our message, but we also have a significant amount of competition in doing so, which makes it much more difficult to stand out. And so it's a pretty interesting balance between the ability to reach people and the ability to stand out. And so you have this sometimes internal struggle that your voice just isn't going to be heard, even though you have these tools to reach people. But if you're focused on your work and you're sharing meaningful commentary like this maybe, or something that touches people in some way, it doesn't have to be inspirational. It could just be something having to do with helping somebody fix a problem they've got in their life. It could be on a motor on a car. But if it helps somebody achieve something so they can move on with their day, that's also a noble cause. So I think that's where I wanted to really get into the guts, the nuts and bolts, and share with all of you this idea that legacy takes time. And what is legacy? Legacy is you taking the time and focusing on your work. Last week I talked about your job and your work. And if you can somehow figure out how to align your job with your work and live with meaning and purpose, you will create legacy. Now, look at me as an example. And I'm going to lay it right out there for you. I struggle from time to time, as I mentioned last week, with how do I reach more people? And then I have to look at whether or not what I'm doing is for ego or if it is for my work. Because part of your work is to shed the ego. It's not to be doing something for popularity. It's not necessarily to be doing something specifically to make money. It's to be doing something to create meaning and purpose in your life. And a byproduct of that may be to make a lot of money. A byproduct of that may be to become famous. But your goal isn't to become famous and rich. Your goal is to do something meaningful with your life. And if you're doing something meaningful with your life and it's aligning with your job, well, great. And then you're going to, make money. You're going to be able to fulfill your dreams, reach your goals, financial goals, things like that. But the foundational premise of the whole thing is to do your work. Again, your job is not to be creating legacy. Your job is to be doing your work. And when you're doing your work and you're living by example and you're inspiring people and you're inspiring change and improvements in society and shaping humanity's perspective on a particular thing, that creates legacy. And your mark on the world lives on for as long as humanity does. And I have to say, you look at somebody like Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold is someone that I truly respect throughout our history. But I'm not so certain that when he wrote a Sand County Almanac, based on his experience with his family planting thousands of trees on his property along the Wisconsin River on his farm, if he had intended for that book, for instance, to become such a monumental and pivotal book in the realm of conservation and land management. Leopold lived a life that was with meaning and purpose. Now, I don't know him. I don't know what his day-to-day life was like. I don't know how he treated people around him, his wife and family. I don't know any of those things. But what I do know is that the things that he focused on in his job aligned with his work. And then he sat down and wrote a Sand County Almanac, and that book is now essentially a Bible of sorts. It is a foundational book on this idea of land management and conservation. So his life and his work and his mark on the world lives on even today. Now, I'm 53 this week. I know there are people that are way younger than I am that are reading his material, and their perspectives when they're young and impressionable are being shaped in their futures. So these young people are reading these books, and it's shaping their philosophies on their life and their perspective on different things. And it will most certainly impact what those young people do with their entire lives. So I just wanted to talk about this idea of legacy. And I think legacy is something that's really important to be thinking about when you're looking at what you're doing for a living with your job and how it is aligning with your work. Or, as I mentioned last week, you could be very happy in your job and it has nothing specifically to do with your work. But if you feel like in your job you're doing something that is, I guess, not against what you believe, or it's not inhibiting your work development, and you feel like it's a place where you can inspire people and help inspire change, improvements, well then great, you should be doing it. And ultimately, you will leave a legacy. Now, thinking about legacy, I was thinking about my social media. My social media alone reaches probably more people than Thoreau reached most of his life. In fact, Thoreau was probably not even thinking about, how do I create something that reaches a lot of people? He was just doing his work. But I think about how I can put a social post up somewhere and it can reach more people than probably Thoreau's book reached in the first year or 2 or 3 of its publication. I think that if we have the ability to inspire people and have a broader reach, I think that's a good thing. But that shouldn't be the central focus, to be gaining attention per se. Attention, specifically, looking for attention and approval, is ego. Ego is something that we essentially need to work to overcome. I mean, there is survival. We need to survive, and a certain amount of ego is necessary in our survival, but there comes a time when ego becomes overwhelming over us, and we just need to figure out how to shed it, enough of it anyway, so we're not doing things for the wrong reasons. We're doing things for the right reasons. So anyhow, I hope that this idea of legacy aligned with the previous terms that I shared with you last week, persistence and perseverance and belief, along with integrity and honor from the previous week before that, all start to shape this idea of a model that you can create for yourself to be doing meaningful work, and as a result, influencing generations in the future, not just today. So anyhow, thank you so much for listening. This is a short video this week, but I wanted to get something out. I'm heading out on a trip to see my mom. She turns 80 the same week I turn 53. And wishing my mom a very happy birthday. It'll be a lot of fun to spend some time with her. We'll be up in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, which is where my parents live. And it's a beautiful place to be, especially this time of the year with the changing of the colors. So we're looking forward to going up there and spending some time, and I just wanted to make sure I got something out here to you before I left town. If you have a birthday, well, I shouldn't say if you have a birthday, we all have birthdays, but if you have a birthday coming up or on your next birthday, the week of your next birthday, sit down and spend some time focusing on where you've been, where you are, and where you're going, and see how that idea of legacy fits into the equation and whether or not you feel like you're doing your true work. Anyhow, thank you so much. Take care.